They hit me with a $30,000 fine for a cabin that wasn't even on HOA property. Once I proved it, things took a turn. Picture this. I'm inside my hand-built cedar cabin, morning coffee sending up steam into the cool mountain air, gripping a stack of legal papers that are about to throw my neighborhood into chaos. The sharp scent of sawdust from my last bit of trim still hangs in the air, mingling with the smell of pine needles crunching under my boots, and there it sat, the ridiculous fine notice, lying on my kitchen counter like a snake coiled and ready to strike. $30,000 for an unauthorized cabin they claimed was inside their domain, except it sat 847 feet beyond their boundary. What they didn't realize was what I knew about land surveys, corrupt HOA politics, and what happens when you try to push around a retired electrician with nothing left to lose. So let me ask you, if your HOA tried to fine you for something built on your own land, what would you do? And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I'll bet you've got your own HOA nightmare stories. I'm Garrett Steele. 2 years ago, I thought I had my retirement plan nailed down. At 52, after 3 decades as a union electrician, I had a modest savings that was supposed to fund quiet years in the workshop, my wife Melody smiling from the kitchen window. But cancer had other plans. When Melody passed, I rattled around our home in Pine Ridge Estates like a marble in an empty can. The beige HOA-approved walls closed in on me. Every perfect lawn reminded me of the projects we'd never finished together. That's when I remembered Uncle Ray's 40 acres spread up in the Colorado foothills, a piece of wild land he'd left me that I'd hardly visited since his funeral. 300 yards past the final HOA street sign, the manicured suburb dissolved into towering pines and deer trails. That first morning out there, I stood in the crisp air, the smell of wet leaves under my boots, the distant hum of my diesel generator coming to life, and I knew exactly what I wanted: a simple cabin. Nothing grand, just a place where a man could drink his coffee without someone measuring his lawn. 30 years on job sites had drilled one thing into me: always get your permits in order. I'd watched too many weekend builders get burned without them. So I headed straight to the county office, pulled every permit I needed: structural, electrical, septic, and paid the extra $300 for peace of mind. Those bright yellow papers meant my 600 square foot cabin was as legal as Sunday morning bells. That's when Vivian Hartwell stepped into the picture. She's the sort of person who leads with her HOA title, like she's announcing her royal lineage. HOA Board President, Vivian Hartwell. At 58, she carried herself with the rigid spine of a lifelong HR executive, topped off with the practiced smile they teach in managing difficult people seminars. She ruled our 5-member board like it was her private empire. Mailboxes were one exact shade of forest green, fence posts 6 feet on the nose, flower beds only plants on her approved list. She even carried a tape measure in her purse and used it on people's lawn ornaments. Vivian had mastered what I call corporate condescension, that syrupy tone where "have a blessed day" sounds like a thinly veiled threat. She'd greet me with that tight-lipped grin, slipping in little comments about community standards, her eyes saying something else entirely about blue-collar retirees who didn't know their place. The day it all began, I was wrangling a stubborn window frame when I heard expensive tires crunching gravel. Her spotless white Lexus rolled to a stop at my property line. She stepped out in high heels that instantly sank into the forest floor. "Mr. Steele," she called sweetly, picking her way toward me like she was crossing a minefield. "I trust you've gotten the proper approvals for this little project?" I pointed to the bright yellow permit nailed to a pine. "County says it's all above board, ma'am." Her smile twitched, barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Well, county permits are one thing, HOA approval is another." That should have been my first warning. But I went back to my window, confident anyone reasonable would know HOA rules. Stopped where the street signs did. 2 weeks later, a certified letter landed in my mailbox. $30,000 in fines for building on land that had been mine long before her HOA existed. Sitting on my half-finished porch, coffee going cold in my hands, I read the closing line. Ignorance of our covenants is no excuse for flagrant violations. Here's the thing about bullies: they bet on you being too tired to fight. They miscalculated. The next morning, I called her directly. Better to clear things up neighbor to neighbor than let it blow up, Mrs. Hartwell. Garrett Steele here. I got your letter about the cabin, but I think there's a mistake. My lands. Outside HOA territory. The pause stretched long enough for me to hear my coffee maker gurgling. Papers shuffled faintly on her end. Mr. Steele, she said, voice dripping corporate sweetness. Our jurisdiction covers all member properties, regardless of exact location. The covenants are very clear. With respect, I've got county permits that show. I'm sure you do, but our legal counsel has reviewed the situation. The fine stands. Good day. Click. I stared at the phone, wondering if I'd fallen into some alternate universe where property lines were optional and HOA presidents ruled like monarchs. The smell of burnt coffee snapped me back. Within a week, she unleashed a campaign straight out of a military playbook. First, she filed a county complaint accusing me of running an illegal rental. The irony? She was twisting my own permits against me. Then came the whispers in the grocery store aisles, neighbors suddenly fascinated by their shoelaces as I walked past. Poor man's not right since his wife passed, I overheard. Small town. Gossip is like living in a fishbowl full of piranhas. Her masterstroke was recruiting neighbors as informants. Suddenly, every time I drove up the mountain road, someone would appear from behind perfect hedges with a cell phone in hand. Lumber deliveries brought out people snapping pictures like they'd spotted a rare animal. The breaking point? She knocked on my door with a clipboard and that predator smile. Garrett, she began like we were sharing tea. I've been thinking. Perhaps we can come to an understanding. I'm listening. If you stop construction immediately and remove the cabin, we might reduce the fine to a manageable $5,000 for administrative inconvenience. I looked at her, offering to graciously reduce a bogus fine by 83%, and something in me shifted. That moment when you realize they think you're gullible, Mrs. Hartwell, I said evenly. I think it's time I did some research. Of my own. Her smile flickered. Research, property records, survey maps, maybe those original HOA documents you like to mention. That Tuesday, I was at the Jefferson County Courthouse with coffee and determination. 3 decades of working with inspectors had taught me this. Paperwork never lies. Every property line, every easement, every covenant lives in triplicate somewhere in a dusty file. First, discovery HOA boundaries aren't just gentlemen's agreements. They're legally mapped, filed with the county clerk at incorporation. Second, my uncle's 40 acres had been recorded 15 years before Pine Ridge Estates was built. The land was grandfathered, meaning no later HOA rules could touch it. Third, buried in their own covenants, Section 12C, subsection 4. Their authority applied only to properties within the boundaries recorded on March 15, 2008. I read that sentence 3 times in the stale courthouse basement. My cabin wasn't just outside their reach, it was untouchable. Time to get a survey. Rex Morrison came recommended as a no-nonsense surveyor who knew property law like his own backyard fence. At 62, he looked like a man who'd spent decades winning arguments with land records. Let me guess, he said when I explained. HOA thinks they own whatever they can see from their street signs. Pretty much, Rex chuckled, setting up his equipment in the morning mist. Seen it before, but GPS doesn't lie. Neither do my measurements. 3 hours later, the verdict. 847 feet outside their line. I sent certified copies to every board member, with a polite letter asking them to withdraw the fine and issue a formal apology. Vivian's reply came within 2 days. Surveyor error. Fine stands. Pay now or face a property lien. That's when I understood this was no longer about lines on a map. It was about control, about a woman willing to burn down a neighbor rather than admit she was wrong. A lien wasn't just a threat to the cabin. It was a threat to my home, to everything Melody and I had built in 3 decades. Vivian had officially leveled up from the neighborhood's petty irritant to a bona fide menace. And she wasn't stopping there. Within days, a polished black sedan rolled into my driveway. Out stepped a man in a perfectly tailored suit worth at least $1,000, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Trailing behind him came Vivian herself, wearing her most convincing concerned neighbor face and holding a manila folder thick enough to choke a Clydesdale. "Mr. Steele," the suited man said, extending a manicured hand. "Richard Blackwell, attorney with Blackwell, Morrison and Associates. We represent the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." I'd heard of them. They specialized in what they like to call community governance disputes, legal jargon for flattening any homeowner who dared stray from the rules. Their billboards along Highway 6 featured grinning lawyers in front of pristine gated communities, with slogans like "Protecting your investment" and "Community standards matter." "We're here to discuss your situation," Blackwell continued, flipping open his briefcase with theatrical precision. "Mrs. Hartwell has shared her concerns about your ongoing construction." The document he handed me was a work of legal intimidation art, 23 pages of whereas and heretofore that boiled down to, "Stop building now, or we'll ruin you in ways you can't even picture." But here's where Vivian made her first real blunder. She got greedy. While Blackwell droned on about community harmony and preserving property values, Vivian embarked on her own private inspection of my yard. From my kitchen window, I watched her measure the gap between my fence and the sidewalk, snap photos of my mailbox from multiple angles, and God help me count the decorative rocks in my flower bed. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about my cabin anymore. She was on a full-blown hunt, building a list of violations to rack up more fines. It was like watching a predator on some twisted HOA safari. The very next morning, a certified letter arrived. My mailbox apparently was 2.3 inches too close to the sidewalk. $500 fine. The stain on my fence, too weathered for community standards. $750 fine. And my truck, the same one parked in my driveway for 8 years, was suddenly deemed a commercial vehicle prohibited in residential zones. $1,200 fine. I sat at my kitchen table, drowning in legal papers and violation slips, the smell of fresh coffee failing to mask the bitter tang of injustice. Then I remembered something my old union rep used to say: "When they bring out the fancy lawyers, it's time to learn their game." So back to the courthouse I went, this time on a fact-finding mission. 3 days of combing through public records revealed something interesting. HOAs in Colorado must file annual reports with the Secretary of State, including full financial statements. Pine Ridge Estates pulled in about $180,000 a year from dues and fees, but their spending was curious, nearly 25% of their budget went to legal fees last year. For a community where the biggest drama was usually about when to put up Christmas lights, that was absurd. And then came the jackpot payments to Blackwell's firm. Over the past 18 months, they'd been paid $67,000 for covenant enforcement. That's roughly $3,700 a month in legal bills for a neighborhood whose biggest fights were over lawn heights. Either we were the most lawsuit-prone subdivision in Colorado, or someone was getting a little too comfortable weaponizing the HOAs. Bank account. So I decided to test my theory. That evening, I knocked on doors with one simple question: "Ever get a legal threat from our HOA?" The answers were eye-opening. Martha Henderson, $800 fine for planting roses instead of marigolds. Bob Schmidt, $500 fine for a visually disruptive satellite dish. Jennifer Walsh, cease and desist for running a home-based accounting business. Every case had involved expensive legal letters from Blackwell's firm. Every single person had paid up rather than fight. The pattern was clear. Vivian had turned HOA enforcement into her personal revenue stream, with Blackwell as her hired gun, but she'd miscalculated. I was retired, mad, and had nothing but time. The next morning, I filed a complaint with the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, requesting a full audit of Pine Ridge Estate's finances. Then I mailed every homeowner a certified letter detailing the legal fee spending and asking pointed questions about where their money was going. Vivian struck back fast, another certified letter, this one threatening me with defamation charges for spreading malicious misinformation, but something was different now. Her tone wasn't commanding, it was defensive. And scared people with power don't back down, they double down. The next escalation came as an urgent meeting notice slid under every door in the neighborhood. Urgent community safety concerns regarding rogue member Action's agenda. Discussion of member harassment and defamation. Proposal for special assessment to fund legal defense against frivolous complaints. Possible suspension of membership privileges for community disruption. Translation. She planned to smear me as a dangerous troublemaker, make everyone foot the bill for her legal fight, and try to kick me out of the HOA entirely. I spent the next 3 days preparing like I was heading into court. My neighbor Rex Morrison, a surveyor, helped me assemble aerial maps, boundary diagrams, and printed copies of the financial records mounted on foam boards big enough to see from the back row. Thursday night came gray and misty, the air thick with the smell of wet pine. The community center was buzzing with tension. Some neighbors clutched my letter about the HOA's legal spending. Others huddled near Vivian, throwing me dagger-like glances. Vivian opened the meeting in her most commanding navy blazer and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. We're here to address the actions of a member spreading false accusations about our finances, she began, gesturing at me like I was something unpleasant scraped off her shoe. We need to decide how to protect our community from this destructive behavior. I stood, foam boards in hand. Before we talk about harassment, Mrs. Hartwell, could you clarify exactly where the HOA's legal authority ends? She replied, smoothly, our authority extends to all member properties as stated in our covenants. I walked to the front, unfolded my first board, and pointed at the county map. According to Jefferson County records, jurisdiction ends here. Granite Ridge Road. My cabin is here 8 for 7 feet beyond that. Murmurs swept the room. Martha Henderson raised her hand. If his cabin's outside our borders, why are we fining him? Vivian's voice turned syrupy. Property boundaries are more complex than— No, they're not, came a voice from the back. It was Rex, unrolling an official county survey. This cabin sits on land grandfathered in 15 years before your HOA existed. The room erupted, neighbors crowding to see the map while Vivian froze in place. Then Bob Schmidt lobbed the real grenade. If we've spent $67,000 chasing bogus claims, what else is questionable? One by one, homeowners stepped forward with their own stories, restrictions that didn't match county codes, rules that didn't appear in the covenants, violations created out of thin air. All of them had cost money. All of them had been paid without a fight. Finally, Vivian snapped. You people have no idea how hard it is to maintain standards with ungrateful homeowners challenging every decision. These FEs are to protect your property values. The room went silent. Everyone could see it now. She didn't see us as neighbors. We were subjects. Rex's voice cut through the quiet. Protecting property values doesn't mean violating property rights or wasting other people's money on sham lawsuits. That's when I brought out my final board. Speaking of money, let's talk about the $23,000 collected for playground improvements that never got built. Vivian's face went pale. The tension in the room felt electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm. That money's in reserve pending contractor negotiations, she said flatly, as though she'd practiced the line in a mirror. 3 years? Bob Schmidt called out. My kids were in kindergarten when that was announced. They're in middle school now. And then, the most unexpected ally stepped forward. Josephine Carter, 78 years old and barely 5 feet tall, carried a worn cardboard box to the front. Mrs. Hartwell, she said, her voice steady, I think it's time we talked about my late husband's files. The room went dead still. Harold was treasurer for 12 years, Josephine continued, setting the box down with a thud. He kept meticulous records, bank statements, receipts, meeting minutes, all cross-referenced. He even sent copies to the State Oversight Board, just like the law requires. She pulled out a thick folder labeled Discrepancies 2019 to 2022. Before his stroke, Harold found missing receipts, unexplained expenses, and payments to vendors who never did the work. He planned to bring it up at the 2022 annual meeting. Then he had the stroke. And you, Mrs. Hartwell, offered to take over his duties. Josephine's eyes locked on Vivian. Very generous of you. And very convenient. I watched Vivian's fingers tremble as Josephine spread Harold's carefully catalogued papers across the table, bank statements showing checks written to contractors who didn't exist, invoices for legal work billed at triple the going rate, payments made to Pine Ridge Property Management LLC, a business Harold's research proved existed only on paper and listed Vivian's home address as its own. Harold had spent the last months of his life trying to untangle these discrepancies. Josephine spoke in the same calm, measured tone she always used, yet her words held the room in absolute silence. By Harold's calculations, there's roughly $47,000 in unexplained spending over 3 years, she said. Money meant for snow removal, maintenance, and community improvements. The figures seemed to hang in the air like gunpowder smoke after a shot. That's not true, Vivian stammered, her voice breaking. Harold was confused after his stroke. Those records can't be trusted. Josephine's expression went cold. My husband's mind was razor sharp until the day he died. Are you suggesting that 4 decades of professional accounting experience evaporated overnight because of a minor stroke? Rex Morrison leaned in, scanning the bank records with his trained surveyor's eye. Ma'am, these transactions show a clear pattern. This isn't confusion, it's deliberate financial manipulation. In that moment, the pieces locked into place in my head like tumblers in a safe. Vivian's relentless push to find me over my cabin wasn't about rules or property values, it was about creating cash flow to hide the money she'd already taken. The phony violations, bloated legal fees, and special assessments had all been a smokescreen, a way to funnel stolen funds into her own accounts. She wasn't running an HOA, she was running a calculated embezzlement operation, silencing dissent through legal threats. My refusal to pay that bogus $30,000 fine had risked exposing everything. Josephine closed Harold's folder with a decisive snap. The only question now, she said, is what we're going to do about it. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just about my cabin anymore. It was about justice for every person in the community who'd been robbed by someone they trusted. This was war. And now, I had an army. The meeting ended with Vivian storming out, muttering about elder abuse and malicious prosecution. Half the community center erupted in furious discussions about theft and betrayal. The other half sat stunned, struggling to accept that their HOA president had been stealing from them for years. Josephine Carter, bless her, invited everyone who wanted to take action to her home the next night. I'll make coffee, she announced in that no-nonsense voice that had probably organized every church potluck and PTA fundraiser for decades, and we'll sort this out properly. 23 homeowners showed up, turning her warm living room into the headquarters of what Rex dubbed Operation Accountability. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the focused determination of people who'd finally had enough. Rex brought reinforcements. His friend Benjamin Cross, a retired attorney specializing in HOA disputes and a man with a particular distaste for corrupt boards. At 65, Ben carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent 4 decades making bullies sweat in court. First things first, Ben said, spreading legal documents across Josephine's table like a general laying out battle plans. We need to know exactly what we're facing. From what I've seen, Mrs. Hartwell has committed multiple felonies: embezzlement, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. he tapped Harold's files. The beauty of financial crimes? They leave trails. Every forged check, fake invoice, and unauthorized transfer is evidence in both civil and criminal court. Martha Henderson raised her hand like a schoolgirl. What about all those bogus fines? Are those illegal too? Absolutely, Ben said, almost smiling. HOAs can only enforce rules written in your recorded covenants. Inventing violations to raise money is fraud, plain and simple. That's when I learned something every homeowner in America should know. HOAs are corporations, subject to state oversight and federal law. They can't invent fees any more than your grocery store can suddenly charge you rent for walking down the produce aisle. Rex pulled out his laptop. We've got Harold's financial records, survey maps proving the cabin jurisdiction issue, and documented patterns of fraudulent enforcement. But we need more. Jennifer Walsh, whose home business Vivian had targeted, volunteered to go door to door gathering every questionable fine and violation notice from the past 3 years. If we're doing this, we're doing it right, she said with a steeliness that spoke of years waiting for payback. Bob Schmidt offered to photograph every so-called violation, proving most were either fabricated or based on imaginary rules. Tom Bradley, a retired IRS auditor, offered to match every HOA expenditure against actual improvements. The plan that emerged was clean and direct. File complaints with 3 agencies at once: the Colorado Secretary of State for Corporate Fraud, the Jefferson County DA for Criminal Embezzlement, and the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies for HOA violations. Meanwhile, Ben would prepare a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen money. The key, Ben explained as Josephine refilled mugs, is to hit them from all sides at once so they can't focus their defense in one place. Our greatest weapon was something Vivian never expected: community unity. Tom's accounting skills made our numbers bulletproof. Jennifer's organization ensured every story was recorded. Rex's surveying expertise nailed down property boundaries for future disputes. And Josephine, she became our moral compass, the reminder that this was about more than money. It was about neighbors not stealing from neighbors. The most satisfying moment came when Rex suggested security cameras. If she's desperate enough to steal 47 grand, she's desperate enough to intimidate or sabotage, he warned. 3 days later, while I was finishing my porch, the crunch of footsteps on gravel caught my attention. My new camera caught a figure in dark clothes trying to smash my generator with a crowbar. The expensive hiking boots gave her away. Vivian had escalated from legal threats to outright vandalism. But I was ready. We all were. We sent the footage to the sheriff, our attorney, and the DA's office. Within 24 hours, charges for trespassing and vandalism were filed. The community rally that followed proved her reign was over. People who'd stayed silent for years began speaking out, sharing stories of intimidation and illegal fines. The predator had become the prey. Word of the charges spread through Pine Ridge Estates within hours. The woman who'd lectured neighbors about standards was now on camera destroying property like a common criminal, but instead of backing off, Vivian doubled down. She hired a crisis management firm. Within 2 days, anonymous flyers appeared on windshields claiming I was a mentally unstable widower who harassed board members and endangered the community. The flyers looked like professional political attack ads, complete with graphics, bullet points, and fake neighbor quotes. Then came the fake social media profiles. They posted in local groups, telling carefully worded stories about my erratic behavior. They were subtle just enough to plant doubt without crossing into obvious defamation. Rex spotted the first fake when his daughter tagged him in a post by Sarah Johnson. A reverse image search revealed the profile photo was a stock model from Nebraska. She's trying to shape the narrative before the truth comes out, Ben said. Discredit the messenger before the message lands. Then came the bombshell. Tom Bradley's forensic accounting revealed the fake Pine Ridge Property Management LLC wasn't just Vivian's side hustle. It was the hub of a network of shell companies and kickback deals involving contractors, lawyers, even county officials. Every major HOA contract in the past 3 years, lawn care, snow removal, maintenance, went to firms that paid inflated consulting fees back to her fake company. Costs were padded by 30 to 40%, netting nearly $180,000 in stolen funds. Jennifer's canvassing revealed this wasn't isolated. 3 other HOAs in Jefferson County show the same inflated costs, fake violations, and shady law firms. This isn't one bad president, Ben said. This is organized fraud across multiple communities. We're looking at a federal case. Vivian's next move was pure desperation. An emergency meeting notice landed under our doors on a Friday night, calling for a $2,500 per household special assessment to cover legal defense against harassment. The vote was set for Monday, barely enough time to react, but the community was awake now. Instead of panicking, people started asking why we needed $300,000 to fight frivolous complaints backed by mountains of evidence. Martha Henderson started an email chain. Has anyone actually seen proof these complaints are frivolous? By Sunday, dozens had replied with their own stories of fines and inflated contracts. It was clear the vote would fail. Worse for Vivian, it had created the perfect venue to share our evidence with everyone. That's when she played her last, ugliest card, a false report to Child Protective Services claiming I was a danger to neighborhood kids. It was designed to tie me up in red tape for months and smear my name beyond repair, but like all her lies, it crumbled under scrutiny. The CPS investigation was closed in for hours. Janet Sullivan, the caseworker assigned to my situation, looked like she'd been through the wars, a woman whose 20-year career had probably exposed her to every variety of neighborhood feud imaginable. She knocked on my door that Tuesday morning wearing the kind of expression people get after handling their third baseless complaint of the week. Mr. Steele, she began, I'm here about a report involving possible safety concerns with children in your neighborhood. I invited her inside, poured coffee, and laid out the whole ugly truth: the HOA's corruption, bogus fines, Vivian's mounting desperation, and our community's coordinated push to uncover systematic theft. Janet jotted down notes while I played her the security footage of Vivian vandalizing my property, showed Harold Carter's financial files, and walked her through the history of manufactured violations. When she finished reviewing it all, she raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, the person who filed this complaint is the same one staring down potential criminal charges for embezzlement? That's correct. She snapped her notebook shut with a sound that could have passed for a judge's gavel. Mr. Steele, in my experience, people who steal from their neighbors rarely have genuine concerns about child welfare. Consider this matter closed. I thought that was the end of it, but Janet's visit sparked something I hadn't seen coming: media attention. Apparently, filing false CPS reports as revenge for exposing HOA corruption makes for a pretty compelling human interest story. By Thursday morning, a reporter from Denver's Channel 7 was on the line asking if I'd go on record for their weekend investigative segment on HOA abuse and community corruption. That's when Vivian made her biggest mistake yet. Instead of staying quiet while criminal investigations gathered steam, she decided to pour gasoline on the fire. She called her own press conference for Friday afternoon at the Pine Ridge Estates Community Center, promising to address malicious rumors and defend community integrity from so-called harassment campaigns. She honestly believed she could wrestle control of the narrative through sheer force of personality. Rex Morrison and I showed up an hour early and found her setting up a makeshift podium, complete with printed talking points and what looked like a professionally designed slideshow about maintaining property values through strong governance. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, more like a corporate meeting than a defense against embezzlement charges. This ought to be good, Rex muttered as we watched her rehearse in front of a mirror propped against the wall. The press turnout exceeded everyone's expectations. Channel 7's investigative crew came with cameras and a producer who clearly knew her way around HOA corruption stories. The Denver Post sent their community affairs reporter, armed with questions about financial transparency. Even the weekly Jefferson County Journal showed up, sensing a story suburban readers would devour. The real shocker, though, was the crowd. Instead of the loyal handful Vivian probably counted on, nearly 80 homeowners packed the room, many carrying copies of Harold Carter's financial documents and their own violation notices. Vivian kicked things off confidently, reading from her prepared remarks about dedicated volunteer service and protecting community investments from frivolous attacks. She cast herself as a victim of harassment, portraying my legitimate boundary dispute as some obsessive vendetta driven by grief-related mental health issues. The first crack in her armor came when Channel 7's reporter asked, "Mrs. Hartwell, can you explain why the HOA paid $23,000 to a property management company registered at your home address?" Her rehearsed smile wavered. Those are complex financial arrangements that wouldn't be appropriate to discuss here." Bob Schmidt's voice cut through from the crowd. "What about the playground fund? Where did that money go?" "Financial details are confidential board matters," Vivian snapped, her composure melting like cheap makeup in the summer sun. That's when Josephine Carter stood from the front row, Harold's folder clutched in her hands like a weapon. "Mrs. Hartwell, nothing about HOA finances should be hidden from the homeowners who pay for them." The room erupted, people shouting questions about bogus fines, inflated legal fees, and unexplained special assessments. Vivian tried to keep control, but 78 furious neighbors demanding answers about missing money can't be managed with corporate jargon. The knockout blow came from Jennifer Walsh. She raised her hand and asked if Mr. Steele's complaints are nothing but harassment. "Why did you try to vandalize his property with a crowbar?" Silence. The kind that swallows a room when everyone realizes they're watching someone's world implode in real time. Vivian's face cycled through shock, rage, and panic before landing on raw fury. "That is a complete lie. This entire meeting is a setup by people trying to destroy community governance." Channel 7's cameras caught every word as she spiraled, accusing residents of conspiracy, claiming elder abuse for questioning her, ordering the press to leave, threatening lawsuits, and finally storming toward the exit while yelling about ungrateful neighbors who didn't value her years of service. But she didn't make it to the door. In the lobby, Sheriff's Deputy Martinez waited with an arrest warrant for grand theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The cameras kept rolling as Vivian Hartwell was cuffed and led away, her polished facade gone, replaced by frantic accusations about framed jobs and malicious prosecution. Justice had arrived with handcuffs and TV crews, and that was just the beginning. Within hours, the footage went viral. By Saturday morning, HOA president arrested for embezzlement was trending across Colorado, with news outlets as far as California and Florida picking it up. Apparently, corrupt HOA officials getting their comeuppance hits a nerve nationwide, but the real main event came Tuesday at the emergency HOA meeting to address what the county prosecutor was now calling systematic financial fraud affecting multiple communities. The Pine Ridge Estates Community Center was overflowing, cars spilling into the street, news vans lined up, curious neighbors from nearby developments crowding in. Inside, every chair was taken, people stood along walls, and others peered through windows as if watching a championship fight. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez attended, along with officials from the Colorado Secretary of State's office and the FBI's white-collar crime unit. What started as our neighborhood dispute had unraveled into what federal agents described as a multi-jurisdictional conspiracy involving HOA corruption, contractor scams, and money laundering. Benjamin Cross opened the meeting by projecting Harold Carter's meticulous financial records onto large screens for everyone to see, bank statements showing payments to fake companies, forged signatures on checks, and documentation of theft totaling $180,000 over 3 years. "This isn't just embezzlement," Ben told the stunned crowd. "This is organized fraud that turned your HOA into a criminal operation." The collective gasp was almost physical. Martha Henderson broke down crying when she realized her Rose Garden fine had helped fund Vivian's Bahamas vacation. Bob Schmidt's face went crimson as he mentally tallied what his family had paid in bogus penalties. Then Rex Morrison took the floor with an even bigger revelation using public records. He traced Vivian's scheme to similar scams in 4 other Colorado neighborhoods. Pine Ridge Estates, it turned out, was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. That's when FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres stepped up. At 45, she radiated the calm authority of someone who'd been making white-collar criminals sweat for decades. Based on your community's evidence, she said, we've opened a federal case involving racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy charges reaching far beyond this neighborhood. This morning, we executed search warrants at 17 locations and arrested 6 individuals connected to this enterprise. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Then came the moment that made everything worth it. Josephine Carter, 78 years old, and our unlikely hero took the microphone. Harold always said democracy works when good people stand up to bullies. She began, her voice steady. For 3 years, fear kept us silent while someone stole from us. But this week proves that when neighbors unite, justice isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The 5-minute standing ovation that followed made the subsequent votes feel almost anticlimactic. Vivian and the entire corrupt board were removed unanimously. New elections were set for the next month. All bogus fines and fees were voided, with promises of restitution. And we adopted what would be known as the Pine Ridge Transparency Covenant. Monthly financial reports, open book audits, and homeowner approval for any legal expenses over $500. My own vindication came when the interim board president announced, the $30,000 fine against Garrett Steele is hereby voided, with our formal apology for the harassment and illegal actions of the previous administration. The applause felt good, but the real victory was walking out into the crisp mountain air, realizing my cabin project had grown into something far larger, a movement against corrupt authority. The healing had begun. 6 months later, Vivian was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for racketeering, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The investigation recovered $2.3 million in stolen funds across 5 HOAs, with Pine Ridge getting back $247,000 more than we'd imagined. Her network had been deeper, stretching nearly a decade with fake contracts, inflated insurance, and kickbacks, but the bigger change was cultural. The new board transformed our HOA into a model of transparency: monthly budgets, open contractor bids, homeowner votes on major spending. The playground Vivian's theft had stalled was finally built, named the Harold Carter Memorial Playground. My cabin became a landmark, the place where the HOA revolution started. Rex and I turned our efforts into a business, Boundary Solutions LLC, helping others fight corrupt boards. Josephine became a local legend, traveling to advise other communities and earning the nickname the HOA whistleblower. Our case inspired the Colorado legislature to pass the Pine Ridge Reform Act, tightening HOA oversight and protecting whistleblowers, with similar bills introduced in 6 other states. Most importantly, our neighbors rediscovered cooperation. HOA meetings became real conversations, and the annual Pine Ridge Festival, funded with recovered money, became a celebration of what ordinary people can accomplish. As I sit on my porch now, coffee in hand, watching kids play at Harold Carter Memorial Playground, I think about Melody. She believed that good people could overcome anything if they stood together. She was right. On my cabin wall hangs Josephine's handwritten note. Harold would be proud. Here's what I learned. Bullies count on your silence, but if you stand up, document everything, and rally your neighbors, even the most entrenched corruption can't withstand public scrutiny. Now it's your turn. Share your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. And if you love seeing bullies, get what's coming. Subscribe. Next week, I'll tell you how I helped an elderly neighbor turn the tables on a contractor who tried to take her life savings. Because sometimes fighting back isn't just about you, it's about protecting Those who can't fight for themselves.